Going into round 10, Sergei Karyakin and Vishwanathan Anand shared the lead in the candidates tournament. And somehow things are looking pretty good for Anand. Just won a really splendid endgame against Aronian. You could feel the momentum was going with him. Today, in round 10, he faced Fabiano Caruana, who's just a half a point behind, and he's suddenly coming through at the end of the tournament. So, let's see what happened. Caruana with the white pieces, and it's an English opening, and this is a pretty well-worn variation. Was quite popular, decades ago. Smyslov used to play it like this. But also became very popular in the 1980s after the 1987 World Championship match, when Kasparov used this system with white against Karpov. So here we go. It's a well-known position, and now this move f3, and we've already seen this move in this tournament in the game between Svidler and Karyakin. In fact, there were 3 English openings out of the 4 games played today. It seems to be the in opening. Somehow there's more tension kept in the position, which I guess suits the players coming into the final stretch. So anyway, f3, and now e3 is the move played in those Kasparov-Karpov games in Seville in 1987, and also in Svidler against Karyakin. But Anand prefers to capture on f3, and he has quite a lot of experience with this. He's previously played Queen e7 against Aronian, but today he played d5, and that's a move that he's played before. d4, everything pretty normal so far. And here Aronian played bishop g5 against Anand. This was in St. Louis in 2015, well, about 6 months ago actually. And this was a pretty sharp game. It was an interesting game, and featured Aronian giving up a pawn and setting up a strong centre. It ended in a draw, but it was quite complex, but no doubt Anand was happy to go into that again. Instead, today, Caruana played a new move, Queen c2. Well, this is a nice idea. The Queen is on an excellent diagonal, pointing down towards the King, but also prevents Black's bishop coming to f5 and looks at this key square on e4. So a pretty logical move. And now knight e4 would actually transpose to a known line, but it's known to be favourable for white. In fact, Kasparov won a very famous game against Ivanchuk in the Soviet Championship in 1988. Went like this, and now Kasparov played this amazing move, g4. Well, that's for another time. Instead, Anand played h6, which is a much better move, simply preventing a bishop or perhaps a knight coming to g5. Bishop f4. So Caruana is playing a proper pawn sacrifice here. He's not attempting to recover this pawn on c4. And after the game, Caruana mentioned that the computer likes knight d5 in this position and thinks that somehow black is okay here. But Caruana said the computer underestimates this position for white. And he said this looks almost winning for white. And, well, that would also be my impression, I have to say. Look at those 3 white pawns. What a pawn centre. And you can just roll them down the board and get a free hit at black's king, basically. Beautiful position. But instead, Anand played knight e4, occupying that square. And now rook ad1. Caruana was blitzing out his moves. Anand was already half an hour behind on the clock, so that put real pressure on him. But this does look very promising for white. 2 bishops, beautifully coordinated pieces. Now bishop f5 from Anand. It's already a tricky position. I think one of the big things, apart from the 2 bishops, is that bishop on g2 looking down this diagonal, and it's not so easy for black to find a good square for that bishop. Reminds me of many Catalan positions, actually, in some ways. But Anand tried to solve that problem straight away with bishop f5. But this is definitely a risky move. I'm not saying there are easy moves for black in this position, because Caruana lunged in with a knight straight away, and of course this opens up the f-file and looks at that bishop, but also opens up the diagonal for the bishop. And now it could get very forcing. No doubt Caruana had analysed this. Now there's a very sharp variation that starts with knight g3, and it's very forcing. So that uncovers the line of the bishop towards the queen. Obviously the queen can't take because it's protected by the knight. So white has to play e4. Black takes the rook here. White takes the bishop. And now the knight is lost, so black tries to get another pawn for it. And here white has several moves. You could perhaps just take here, but that's probably not so good. The queen comes out to maybe g5 and then rook across. Black has a lot of pawns for this, or you could perhaps take the knight here and then recapture. So white has two bishops against a rook and black has lots of pawns, or maybe even give up that bishop and play queen h2. Well, it's a very unclear position with black having so many pawns, but of course very risky for Anand to go in for this when clearly Caruana had been analysing this. But it's very double-edged. Instead, Anand played a safer move. He dropped the knight back here. So again, a discovered attack on the queen, but of course that invites the pawn forward. So the bishop had to drop back, and Caruana simply stepped out of the bishop's line with queen here. And this is a difficult position for, well, definitely for black. You know, white has such beautiful pieces. But on the plus side for black, you know, at least his bishop has found a spot, and there is a bit of pressure on e4. But it's definitely easier for white to play than black. For example, if you play f6, which we'd like to do to get rid of that knight, then suddenly the e-pawn just piles forward, and, well, you can take an exchange, but actually this is really tremendous for white. Here, and that knight doesn't have a very good square to go to. For example, here, queen c4, and those bishops are just fantastic. You know, black is really caught here in the crossfire. Beautiful position. And so, I mean, definitely not easy. Anand played knight e7, which, don't know, of all the moves, I mean, I'm not really sure what black should play, but knight e7 looks very passive, and Caruana said after the game he thought that he could just play here slowly with h4 and just build up on the king side. But he said that he wanted to find a knockout, and he went for it. He sacrificed the bishop. This is great stuff. Well, Anand has to take this, and now simply queen h5. And just, I think logic tells us that white should have fantastic compensation here. Look at the harmonious pieces. King is getting exposed. This rook is way out of the action. Not easy for the queen to transfer to the king side to sort of match white's queen. Must have decent compensation. Having said that, still lots of variations to calculate. Well, let me show you one typical defence. Rook here, defending f7. So white takes on h6. So now the king ducks out of the way. But now we have this typical idea. The rook swings up the board. The rook lift wants to come to h4. And white can even sacrifice more material here. So white is a whole rook down, but actually there's no decent defence to rook h4 and mate on h7. For example, here, rook here, and queen e7 just loses to a fork. It's very easy. So black would have to give up the queen, and this should be winning for white. Still A few little technical issues, but should be winning. So, I mean, there are lots of possible defences, but it looks as though white is... this sacrifice is sound. But here Anand played, I think, very pragmatically and very sensibly. He simply returned the piece. Of course, this was taken. Caruana said he originally intended rook f4, but he saw some kind of defence there. But instead he just took back his sacrifice piece. And now here's Anand's point. He can now exchange queens. I think very pragmatic, very sensible, actually. Caruana exchange. So material is now level again, but white positionally definitely stands better. And here it was tempting just to shut out that bishop. I can see myself playing that move. It looks very good, but actually, and white is certainly better here, but black would definitely be able to get some counter chances with f6 if he's not afraid to give back a pawn. And okay, white can take this pawn and check. And here, now this bishop at some moment is going to come out. I think that's the point. We don't actually trap it in with this move. And actually, black does have some freedom here and starts to get counterplay. So I think Caruana made a very good decision here. Instead of going for that, he played f6, which preserves his positional advantage. And although it lets out this bishop, in fact, this pawn is just superb on f6. For a start, it secures the position of the knight on e5, and this is a monster of a piece. It also leaves this pawn somewhat stranded, and also there are chances still to attack black's king. Now, Anand could play c6 here, and that shuts out the bishop. Whoops, I misfired. Shuts out the bishop, and that's reasonably solid. Now, I think white has a very good position here, but still have to break through. I mean, one possibility is to play h4 and simply go for an attack. You can see this pawn is fantastically placed, and it cuts black's position in two. It's very difficult to bring the rooks over to defend. And the idea would be, well, you could recapture here, but something like this. This is very brutal. Or you could build up more slowly. But white definitely in control. But instead, Anand played knight e4, and this move is really very shaky. Caruana could simply exchange and play again for this attack, and now rook f4 and just go for it against the king. This rook is going to join in shortly as well, maybe in one of these ways. This would be strong. Instead, Caruana played in a more subtle way. He simply attacked the knight. Anand took the pawn, and now rook c1. The problem is that knight can't retreat to these squares. They're covered by the bishop. So it comes back this way. And after bishop takes b7, white is actually winning material here. If rook a b8, that bishop cuts back. And this is just tremendous for white. Black's position is just kind of split in two. Again, that pawn is wonderful. That's going to support a knight coming into e7. Anand played rook d8, but this lost material straight away after bishop c6, hitting rook and knight. And basically now, Caruana, well, his technique was very good, but he's mopping up now. Got to watch out for a rook takes e5 and knight f3 check, so king f2 is very, very secure. And now here's the last little trick. Nice technique. You move the rook to the side, and of course black cannot take that knight because it's checkmate on the back rank. And once again, that pawn does the job, taking away the square from the king. Anand played bishop e4, but now it's just mopping up. And this is very good. The trick in these positions when you're the exchange up is to exchange rooks. Once you exchange rooks, it's really simple. King g1 is an excellent move. So after rook takes f6, rook f1. Of course, if the rook moves away, the rook takes on f7. Anand resigned here. Basically, he's got to exchange rooks. After the exchange, it's really, really easy. It's always the same in these kind of endgames. The rook comes back. hits all the pawns. It's over for black. So superb victory from Caruana, and he now shares the lead with Karyarkin after 10 rounds. They both have 6 points, Anand and Aronian on 5.5. So still incredibly close at the top. But I have to say that the momentum really seems to be with Caruana now. Over the last few games, he's saved 2 very dubious positions. First against Svidler and then against Giri, and now he's won 2 excellent games against Nakamura and Anand. So anyway, it's looking very interesting. See you tomorrow.